Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Jim Yeargan. Jim is a DUI attorney in Atlanta with Yeargan Kert, LLC, AtlantaDUILawyer.com, and he helps business owners, executives, and other licensed professionals stop criminal charges from destroying their lives. Well, I know, Jim, that when something like this happens, especially in certain circumstances, when you're talking about professionals, it can really have an impact on their business and their lives. So I'm sure there's lots of questions that you're going to be able to answer. So welcome to the show, Jim Yeargan.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, give us a little bit about your background and how you became a DUI lawyer and how long Yeargan Kert has been in business.
Sure, absolutely. I've been a DUI attorney for 15 years, and it actually isn't what I first thought I'd go into, but I'm thankful that I found it. It's a very interesting field, and you get to work with a lot of great people and help them out and stop these things from, ruining and devastating their lives. I began my career as a DUI prosecutor and did that for 3 years in the city of Atlanta. And that's really where I cut my teeth and learned everything. And it was a great opportunity because I got to work with the police and the task force officers. I got to know all the prosecutors and the judges. And then after I'd been there for a while, I was able to start training people. So I trained the prosecutors, and I would go to the police academy and teach them how to testify in court and write police reports and things like that. So I had a very strong foundation on that side. And then when I was able to start doing defense work, I was able to use all of that, of course, to my advantage and my client's advantage. So it was a really great way to start my career.
It's very helpful to really have close knowledge of both sides so that you know exactly what it is that you need to do to help your clients out. So let's talk about those clients. What kind of clients is it that you tend to help?
Sure, absolutely. I really enjoy working with people who, of course, everyone wants to beat their charges, but who basically have, I hate to phrase it this way, but something to lose. It's nice working with professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, pilots, people like that who really care about the outcome of their case and really don't want their lives disrupted by it. Mainly when people first get this charge, they kind of go into a downward spiral thinking that their life is over and it's going to cost them their career, their family, their driver's license, their ability to earn a living, everything. And it's nice to be able to help them out of that spiral and show them that that's not going to happen. Some people, it amazes me, some people get a DUI and not just DUIs, but criminal charges in general, and they just don't care. They're like, oh, I'll just go plead guilty to it, or, they have a long record. It doesn't matter to them. But I enjoy working with people who don't want this to interrupt their lives or disrupt their lives and want to get everything back on track and get this behind them. So basically, when I say people have something to lose, they're wanting to keep their life as it is, keep their family intact, keep their job, their ability to work, all of that.
So talk to me about some of those consequences if there is a DUI on record. What does that mean to a professional?
Sure. It really varies by profession. And that's why when you're looking for a DUI lawyer, you need someone who knows the ins and outs, because many times you're dealing with more than just the actual criminal charges. You're dealing with what's going to happen to the job, the driver's license, insurance rates, things like that. But for instance, if a pilot gets a DUI and they're convicted, they'll never fly again. They're grounded for life. So you definitely, when you have those cases, need to be very careful, and they need to hire someone who knows what they're doing. Lawyers, it used not to be such a big deal, but especially the State Bar of Georgia, they take more of an interest now if an attorney gets a DUI because they're worried about attorneys going into downward spirals or using alcohol as a crutch, and they don't want that to impact their practice. Nursing, many times nurses will have to jump through many hoops, go through appeal processes to have their nursing licenses renewed because the board is afraid that with alcohol, maybe a drug, nurses have, many nurses have unfettered access to drugs. So a lot of times you'll have to go through the appeal process with them to let the board understand that it was just DUI alcohol. There's not a drug problem there, and that they can still be around medications. So it really varies on each, how the person's employed, basically.
But these consequences are definitely a lot to think about. So talk to me about the state of mind when somebody first gives you a call. What's on their mind? What questions, what concerns do they have? And how are you able to help ease some of those concerns right away?
They're usually in a pretty bad place. They're usually depressed, sad, scared. A lot of times they're beating themselves up. And many times people aren't aware that their blood alcohol concentration was as high as it is or was. So they're very disappointed because they really didn't think they were doing something wrong. And then they have all this evidence and alleged proof that something else has happened. So many times they're worried about their driver's license. They think they're going to lose it for a year and not be able to drive. So they're worried about getting to and from work, especially if they work in outside sales or if they're in any type of pharmaceutical sales, or their job has company insurance or they drive a company car. They're worried about getting their kids to school and to other activities. They're worried about going to the grocery store. So it really impacts not just the career, but daily life as well. So all of that comes in on them. And they're really worried about basically how they're going to do their daily activities and function.
So talk to me about the blood alcohol level right away. What is that level, and, how many drinks, or is there any safe amount of alcohol to be drinking before driving?
In Georgia, the legal limit is 0.08. And what that means is, if they have a test on you, this is, of course, what the prosecutor is saying, that at 0.08 or higher, whether you're feeling it or not, you are legally drunk. Now, of course, some people who drink a lot, they can be at 0.08, a 0.10. Some can be double, even triple that and not feel the effects because they drink a lot. Georgia also has what's called their less safe statute. So say your blood alcohol concentration is not a 0.08, say it's below that. Say you get pulled over, arrested for a DUI, and you're at 0.06. Well, they still charge you with what's called less safe. So in this case, they're trying to say that while you weren't 0.08 or higher, they feel that the alcohol was affecting your ability to drive to the point where you're a less safe driver. So even though you've been below the legal limit, there's still, and that's where the numbers come into play. Now, of course, the 0.08 or higher, that's for drivers age 21 or older. Also drivers who are not what are CDLs or commercial driver's licenses. So for the average person on the street driving a car, 0.08 or higher is the limit.
And is that one drink, two drinks?
Again, that varies quite a bit from person to person. Bigger guys, they can drink more. Women, sometimes one drink will do it. That's what we hear a lot, especially in females, is they'll go out to dinner and they'll just have a glass of wine, maybe two, and they're smaller and their blood alcohol concentration will be a 0.10 or a 0.12. So it really depends on the person, what they've had to eat that day, things like that. That's why it's really a wild card. A lot of people think incorrectly, but they think that zero tolerance is the law, where if you have any amount of alcohol in your system, you're not allowed to drive legally. And that's not true in Georgia. In Georgia, you can actually drink and drive as long as you're not 0.08 or above, or you're less safe. So sometimes people get pulled over and they'll say, oh, I told the officer I had 2 or 3 drinks. I shouldn't have done that. Well, that's fine, because again, you can drink and drive. You just can't be over the limit or quote unquote less safe. I tell people in this day and age, don't drink and drive. It's just not worth it, because when they pull you over and they smell the alcohol coming off you, whether you've had a drink or two, it's probably all downhill from there. The other problem with that is prescription medication, because a lot of times officers will pull people over and their blood alcohol concentration will be fairly low. It might even be 0.04, 0.03. And then the next question is, well, which medicines do you take? And if you tell them, you take antidepressants or you take any type of pain medicine or blood pressure medicine, whether you've taken it for 10 or 15 years, then they're going to say, well, now you're DUI combination alcohol and medication, saying that the two are working together to affect your driving.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I certainly know that can be the case. And I remember one time I was pulled over and I was using hand wash that had alcohol in it. And because the officer smelt the alcohol in the hand wash, he made me go through the whole test. And luckily I hadn't been drinking, but yeah, you just you never know. Better safe than sorry, and not drink and drive at all.
Right. And in this day and age, you don't know anymore.
Let's talk about the sentence then. What is the sentence for somebody that has been drinking and driving and is over the limit?
For first offense, and in Georgia, we have different look-back periods. So the first look-back period, as far as your license is concerned, is a 5-year look-back. So you want to see if the person has any other DUI convictions in a 5-year period. And that 5-year period is measured from date of arrest to date of arrest. It's not when the case actually closes. In some of the jurisdictions in Georgia, it can take 2 or 3 years for a case to close. So that's why they use the arrest date. That's as far as license sanctions. So if you only have one DUI conviction in a 5-year period, and this is not taking into account administrative license suspensions, because there are many different suspensions you deal with. But as far as the actual conviction, it's a 120-day license suspension, and there's a limited permit for work, school, doctor's appointments, things of that nature. As far as the actual court punishment goes, you're generally looking at 40 hours of community service, a fine of anywhere from $300 to $1,000. Again, that varies from court to court. Roughly, you're looking at most jurisdictions, $300, maybe a $700 fine. They add surcharges on. You're not being punished for going to court. Those are just state fines and fees you pay. Even if you pay a speeding ticket, you pay those. But on a DUI, they're so high they can actually double the fine. So on a $500 fine, you usually end up paying a total of about $1,000. You have to go to DUI school, which takes a weekend. You usually have to do a drug and alcohol evaluation, which takes about an hour. And then you have to do 12 months of probation. And most judges will let that probation become non-reporting once you complete everything, which means you don't have to check in with them once a month. But other judges won't. So you may have to make a trip once a month to the probation officer just to check in so they can take a look at you. They may drug test you. Usually have to pay about $49 a month while you're reporting to the probation. So that's an extra expense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Certainly not something that anybody would want to go through, but carry on. You were going to add on to that?
Sure. So the next look-back period is a 10-year look-back period. And this is different from the suspensions, but if you have more than one DUI in Georgia within a 10-year period, the fines and penalties really increase. The fines go up several $100s, but the community service goes up from 40 hours to 240 hours. There's a minimum requirement of 3 days in jail, and that's if you can get the minimum. Some judges like to give 10, some even like to give 30 days in jail, and then you still have to do the DUI school, drug and alcohol evaluation. A lot of judges will make you do a MAD victim impact panel, which is a 2-hour lecture put on by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. You go to one time. Some judges will require AA depending on how many DUIs you have in that 10-year period. And then, of course, if you have more than one DUI in the 5-year period, if you're really cramming them in there, you start getting into ignition interlock devices put on your car. That's the device you have to blow into before your vehicle will start. So when people start getting them within the 5 and 10-year look-back period, the punishments skyrocket. They build up exponentially. And then the final look-back period is over a lifetime. And so if you had a DUI 20 years ago, the prosecutor, the judge can still take that into account. Now, that's not as serious. There are no basically mandatory minimums on lifetime look-back. So once you're outside of that 10-year period, there's not a minimum sentence that the court has to give you, such as the 3 days in jail and the 240 hours of community service. So usually older DUIs, they usually don't up the punishment, but some jurisdictions do. Some judges will. So you have to be careful even if you have a DUI that's 15, 25 years old.
Well, it's an extremely serious thing to do, to drink and drive, and many lives are lost because people have chosen to do that. But, there are the cases where, one drink or one little mistake really can put an interruption in somebody's life. So what can you do to prevent some of these things going on the record?
Absolutely. It's a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we can get the charges totally dismissed. We've done that many, many times where even the moving violation gets thrown out. And I say even the moving violation because usually when you take these cases to trial, you may beat the DUI charge, but the individual is usually convicted of speeding or failure to maintain lane, which is on the video. Those are usually hard to beat because, the proof is right there. It did happen. But many times we have been able to get the whole case dismissed. Sometimes we're able to get the DUI reduced to a lesser charge, usually reckless driving, which sounds worse than it is. But in Georgia, that's just like a fast speeding ticket. It's just a regular moving violation. And in those cases, you still pay a fine and do community service, go to DUI school. You basically get a DUI sentence, but the trade-off is you don't get your license suspended. You don't get the DUI in your driving history. And the big part is you can tell future employers or your current employer that you are not convicted of a DUI. Mm-hmm. And in some instances, we can even get it lower than reckless driving, just get it to the moving violation. Sometimes, running a stop sign or speeding. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis. But if we can't get the case totally dismissed, we do always try to get it reduced.
And as far as somebody being caught and having some foreknowledge of what to do or what not to do, is there anything that they can say or, prevent from saying that's going to help out their case?
Sure. Again, I tell everyone that they have to make this decision for themselves when it happens. But then I say, if I were in the position where I've been drinking and I get pulled over, I would refuse the field sobriety test. They're voluntary. They can't force you to follow their finger with your eyes or to walk the line or to stand on one leg. I would not take any breath, blood, or any chemical tests. Just refuse them. Don't admit to drinking. Be polite. Just say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Don't talk too much. Just answer their questions shortly. And again, if they ask, why don't you want to do these tests? You can say, well, I met a lawyer once and he said it's best not to do this. But keep in mind, when you refuse to do everything, you are going to get arrested. They're not going to throw their hands up and say, oh, well, you're free to go. But if you have been drinking, if you are intoxicated and you don't do the test, you're putting yourself in a better position to fight the charge because they're not going to have a whole lot of evidence to hold against you.
And when you are arrested, are they able to do the test once they get you to the jail?
In Georgia, they request that you take the test. Now, if you refuse, what they can do is they can go to a judge, and everything's computerized now, so it's not like it used to be. They can get a warrant and do what's called a forced blood draw, and they will take you to the hospital. And if you fight them, you'll actually be held down, and they'll put a taser to you and say, if you kick, we're going to shock you, and have a nurse draw your blood. Now, most jurisdictions don't do that anymore. Some do. And some officers, any officer can go get this warrant, but they generally don't, because by the time it takes them to contact the judge, do all the computer work, get the warrant, take you to the hospital, draw the blood, then take you to the jail, they could have been on the road and probably arrested 3 or 4 other people in that time frame. So some officers will do that, but the majority are not going to actually go get a warrant and take your blood. So it is a possibility that they can force you, but they don't do it the way they used to. That was very popular a couple of years ago. More officers were doing it, but generally speaking, most do not.
Well, that's certainly good to know for anybody listening that can take that advice and use it to their advantage. But, what other fears go through their mind when they are first pulled over?
Many times they equate it to a speeding ticket because or a traffic ticket. That's probably the encounter most people have with the police. So they think, well, if I'm cooperative and I do everything the officer says, he's going to let me go. So that's why a lot of people decide to do the field test. They decide to blow. They basically, go along to get along. And in a DUI case, it's not like a speeding ticket where they may issue you a warning or just charge you with a few miles over the limit. They're not going to let you go once they smell the alcohol. So a lot of times people have the misconception that if they're very friendly, the officer will just release them. Now, it's always good to be friendly. There's no need to be rude or fight. And again, be respectful. But that's why I tell people to refuse everything, because they're not going to let you go. You're just going to dig your hole deeper by trying to cooperate and agree with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the difference that you've been able to make to some of your clients' lives here, because, like I said, it's an extremely dangerous thing to be drinking and driving. But if you do get caught and you need help, it can really have a positive outcome on your life to not have that on your record. So give me an example of a situation that you've come across where you were able to really help somebody out, and what did it mean to them?
Absolutely. Recently we had a pilot. We were able to get all of his charges reduced, and that meant he could keep his job. And pilots, those are great jobs, and they get paid a lot of money. Had he been convicted, he literally would have lost his ability to work, because they pull your pilot's license. We've helped recently another person who was going through a child custody dispute. His wife was trying to use the arrest and everything against him, even though his kids were not in the car. It didn't have anything to do directly with that situation. But of course, her attorney was trying to say, oh, he's been arrested, he has a drug problem, an alcohol problem. We're able to get all that dismissed, so that wasn't able to be used against him. So it's really interesting how DUI affects so many different areas of a person's life, depending on what's going on at that particular moment.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's pretty common. Divorce is still very common. And, if there is a DUI on somebody's record, what does that mean as far as the custody of children and things like that?
Absolutely. That, again, the other side can use that against them and try to say that, they're not fit to be around children, or they're not a good parent. Even if it's just the first arrest, they worry that this is going to develop into a pattern and keep occurring. So divorces are already contentious enough. Adding an arrest and now a criminal record into that doesn't help. A lot of jurisdictions also post your mugshots online. So when people call, they're worried about, oh, I'm going through a divorce. Is my soon-to-be ex-wife going to be able to find this? And even if they're not going through a divorce, they're worried, will my employer see my mugshot online? If someone Googles my name, is this going to come up? Things like that. So in this society where we have so much technology, that's a huge downfall, placing those mugshots online.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you're a specialist in DUI cases. Can any type of lawyer defend a DUI case?
Unfortunately, any type of lawyer can, and a lot of lawyers will take a DUI case. To be honest, there's a lot of money in it, so a lot of these guys will charge a lot of money and not do anything for you. DUI has actually been declared by the American Bar Association to be a subspecialty. So that's why when you hire a DUI lawyer, you need to ask, not only about their experience, but if they have certain certifications, like if they're certified in field sobriety testing. Are they certified as a student, or are they certified as an instructor? Have they taken the classes and are certified on the breath testing machines? Have they taken the drug recognition evaluator classes? Have they taken other drugs that impair driving classes? Things like that. There are many, many classes and certifications that real DUI lawyers, people who actually do this all the time, have, that lawyers who are just trying to get money and flip the cases with pleas will not have.
You say it's a lucrative business, which is great if you're really in the business of helping people to restore their lives. But, what does that look like for the client? How much does a DUI case tend to cost?
It varies quite a bit from lawyer to lawyer, but for good, solid representation, it's going to run you anywhere from a starting point of $5,000, depending on your record and other factors, up to $10,000 or $15,000. That's why I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that especially makes sense if, some of the examples that you use, like a pilot or lawyers, somebody that has a lot to lose, like you said up front. What holds people back from not getting the right help, though?
I think it's they don't understand. They will talk to a bunch of lawyers and they'll get the $5,000 or $10,000 quotes. Then they'll talk to other lawyers and get the $1,500 or the $2,000 quote, or even lower. And I don't think they really understand what all goes into fighting one of these cases. in Georgia, a DUI case is actually the hardest case to try because of the science, the ever-changing law. There's so much involved in it. It's not just something you can pick up and do. So I don't think they really understand that specialized lawyers are needed in this case. Also, people ask for recommendations, and they get lots of recommendations from this friend, or this person knows someone who helped someone else. And of course, they don't know who that person is or what their case was or what the lawyer did, but it sounds like a credential. So they go and talk to this person, and they just don't realize that the lawyer they're talking to is not in the best position to help them with their particular set of facts.
Now, you said up front that you didn't necessarily plan on becoming a DUI lawyer, but that's what you are now, and you're good at it. What is it about this industry that you really liked, and why do you continue to be in this area of defense?
It's really a fascinating area, but the main thing is I get to work with so many interesting people and just really good people from all different walks of life. You do some areas of criminal defense, and honestly, you're just dealing with people who just aren't good people. But with DUIs, it's professionals and people who just made a mistake or didn't realize maybe they had one too many. And in some cases, they're going to pick someone else up who was too drunk to drive, so they think they're doing the right thing. So you get to work with really good people who just made not the best decision one night, and they're very scared, and you get to help them put their lives back together and get back on track.
Well, like I said, it's a very scary moment in your life to be charged with a DUI or, get pulled over and have all these emotions going through your head. You certainly want the best representation. So, Jim, what is the best way for people to contact you if they want your help to represent them?
They can contact us through our website, which is atlantaduilawyer.com, or directly on the phone number, which is 404-467-1747, or they can email me directly at jim@duigym.com.
duigym.com. Well, Jim Yeargan, it's been very interesting in talking to you today. There's a lot going on in that industry, and there's definitely a lot of people that need help and the right professional help. So I'm sure a lot of these questions that you've answered today is really going to help out anybody that is listening. Well, Jim Yeargan, thank you very much for being my guest on Expert Profiles Atlanta today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Neil.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.